Today I wanted to get a little bit more serious before... So I wanted to talk about a game called Yume Nikki, as it's a very interesting game to talk about. Yume Nikki is a game about a woman named Marutsuki. I understand she doesn't exactly look like a woman here, but she owns her own apartment, so I would say she's more on the woman's side. And I'll also get into why this little collection of pixels here is one of the more interesting characters in a video game, but that will come a little later. Marutsuki lives alone in her apartment with not much around her room but a TV and an outdated video game system, a bed, a bookcase, a desk, a balcony that you can go out onto, and a door outside that Marutsuki refuses to go through with a shake of her head. Eventually, with nothing else to do, you're going to go to bed. That is where the real game is, if you can call it that. When you go to bed, you start on the balcony accompanied by weird music, and you can finally go through that door to the outside, except that it doesn't lead outside. It leads to the hub of this game. When I say game referring to Yume Nikki, I use the word very loosely. It's more akin to an art piece, so in that sense not everyone's going to like it. Just like not everyone likes Journey, some people aren't going to like Yume Nikki. Maybe even more so than Journey, because at the very least Journey has a defined destination, even if how you get there is different for everyone. Yume Nikki stretches the idea of a video game by quite a bit. Yes, there's an ending to the game, but that is far from the point of playing Yume Nikki. There are items to collect, but they aren't really power-ups, they're just items that you find in the world. You might find a bicycle that you can ride around on. Or you might find a poop head item that does exactly what you think it does and nothing else. Or you might find a knife that lets you stab the NPCs of your dreams and kill them, but you don't get anything out of that. You don't level up and there are no hit points on the enemies. There also isn't a real story to this game either, as there are absolutely no words in this game unless you count the tutorial and the menu as words. So we have a game with no real story, no real objective, no dialogue. What's the point? While you certainly have to be the right type of person to play this game in the first place, I also think that a large amount of the following for this game also comes from the interesting history that comes with Yume Nikki, as that is a big part of the intrigue with the game. Yume Nikki was made by one person who goes by the name of Kikiyama. I say person because nobody actually knows anything about the person that made the game either. Yume Nikki first really appeared on the Japanese board called 2-channel, which is essentially the 4chan of Japan, in 2003. Kikiyama would spend time talking with the people on the board and asking for tips on what to add in the game. Being made in RPG Maker, Kikiyama started with version 0.01 and worked their way up to version 0.1 by around 2007, and then, well, that was it. After spending a good chunk of time making and modifying the game and taking suggestions from person to person, Kikiyama just dropped off the board and stopped posting entirely. But by 2010, the game was already a huge success in Japan, and the unofficial English release had been out for quite some time. The game was actually the 14th most downloaded game in Japan for the year of 2010, out of any other game that came out that year. It even got its own manga. Nobody really knows what happened to the creator, but it's safe to say they moved on to something else. That is, until Yume Nikki was recently posted on Steam and Kikiyama finally resurfaced with an odd trailer that only they could make for Yume Nikki. So what does any of this have to do with Yume Nikki? Well, just like any art piece, understanding it starts with understanding what the artist's motive was. And while it isn't the easiest with how anonymous they have remained, we have a lot of material on this Kikiyama in the form of the main character in the game in general. Hell, the main character's name directly translates to windowed. So what is there about this main character that fans of the game just seem to fall in love with so much? After all, she never speaks or is ever spoken to unless you count being spoken to. Well, going into her dreams tells us more about her than being told precisely what she is thinking at any moment. And what do the dreams tell us about this girl? Well, that changes from person to person, and there are enough theories on YouTube for you to shake a stick at. But there's enough concrete ideas in the game that paint the same picture for anyone that plays it for a good amount of time. While we may never know what means, we can get an idea that Marutsuki is a very lonely and sad person. Somebody that stays inside all the time and doesn't want to go out and would rather seclude themselves and sleep all day and night, locked in dreams and nightmares and interacting with strange creatures that are twisted versions of people from her reality. Each door in the hub world leads to another world with more NPCs for you to interact with in one way or another, accompanied with some of the most surreal and horror-tinged music that might scare some away and pull others in. I'm serious, listen to some of this. These worlds also lead to other subworlds that you can't access through a door. And some of these subworlds link back to the other worlds, connecting everything in a very loose way that you can't help but start to make some connections yourself. Is this town that she wanders around in reminiscent of the town that we never get to see in her real world? Does this maze-like mall with its inhabitants that move away from you if you try interacting with them reflect people's apathy towards her? Clearly it's all some form of escapism, and there are concrete themes that you can form here, but a lot of other things that are loosely connected remain up to interpretation in one way or another, because our character has a lot to say without saying anything at all. Refusing to go out, practically living in her dreams, a blanket of depression and social anxiety weighing her down and making it impossible to get out of bed and do much of anything. That fear of being judged and watched by everyone. Perhaps the signs of something much darker that might have happened to her in the past. It's all very morbid stuff, and all from a game that has no dialogue with a character that doesn't speak at all. It gives a good insight of what Kikiyama set out to do when he made this game, creating a character with many layers if you choose to dive into the game, and all from a character that's just a couple of pixels no less. But it's because of this that this game has spawned a small cult following. When fans play through Yume Nikki, they might see what they want to see, but there's a sense of community in that. Being able to look at something like this without brushing it under the covers and calling it fake deep or overly pretentious is what makes this game interesting. A very lonely and sad character that some people might look at and relate to in one way or another.